never thought about buying being hard myself. So what have you seen that would tell you that buying is harder than selling?
You know what's really interesting is if you think about buying as a consumer, and you think about what Amazon did to make buying easier and the great advantage they have gained because they made buying so easy, you realize after Amazon has become what it has become that buying online before Amazon was actually fairly difficult. And now that Amazon is there, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I use that as kind of a corollary because in B2B buying, which is a lot more complicated, it's even more difficult. Um, and there is some research from Gartner that talks about how complicated and difficult the buying process is. And if you think about, we often think of the buying process being pretty linear. Oh, they identify a problem, they look at different solutions, they make a short list of vendors, then they, kind of research each one and select a vendor and decide on it and move forward. And we think of this very linear thing. Well, the thing that makes it so complex is one of the things I would say the single thing that makes it more complex and difficult is the fact that there are anywhere between 6 to 14 stakeholders that usually get involved in making a purchase decision. So there was some famous research from CEB about 6-7 years ago. Probably remember the famous 5.4 stakeholders get involved to make a buying decision. Well, they updated that a couple of years later to 6.8, I think it was. And Gartner's research actually shows 13 to 14 in an IT purchase. So I mean, that's a huge number of people. So instead of being this linear process, B2B buying is this highly recursive process, both for the initial champion and also for all the different stakeholders that get involved. They have so many different tasks they have to accomplish. And then put on top of it, a layer on top of that, the fact that they've never done it before. So unlike consumer buying, where we do a lot of consumer buying, each one of us, B2B buying is so rare, and in some cases, it's a once in a lifetime experience for that buyer, that it is really difficult. And so if you think about who knows more about the buying process, the buyer or the salesperson, is hands down the salesperson, the sales organization, because they've been through that buying process dozens, hundreds, thousands of times as a group. And that buyer may be the only time they're ever going to go through that process. So they're highly prone to, face planting and making a big mess of it.
So in which area my experience with my customers that they buy often, and that's why I only have a few customers that they repeat.
Yep.
Not everybody has that experience because some people their job is just to find new customers. Where do you see them where do you see the customers really face planting, and how can we add value before they even get to that point?
There's so many different places along the buyer journey, and speaking of the word Amazon, I use this analogy of guiding someone through the rainforest. If you've been through the rainforest a lot, then you've got a good shot at knowing exactly what to expect. But if you're guiding somebody through it, they don't know what dangers there are. They don't know what might happen to them. And a lot of champions, a lot of those buyers, they initially start out with all this enthusiasm. And one of the most common, but then it gets beat down pretty good, because as an example, let's say you're in sales and your buyer comes to you and you have this great initial conversation, maybe a couple of conversations. They're so excited and they say, oh, I'm going to go tell my boss. I'm going to go tell my stakeholders. And they run into the other office, proverbial office these days, with all this enthusiasm. But have they been trained as an expert sales rep? Are they an expert sales engineer knowing exactly, answers to all the difficult questions that might come up? No, in fact, they have no idea what they're running into. And what quite often happens is they run into the brick wall of, they go to their boss or whoever it is they're excited to tell, and they ask all these questions that they have no idea how to answer, concerns, and objections and things like that. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, maybe this isn't as good as I thought it was. So that's just one example, and there are literally dozens of pitfalls like that can happen in a buying journey if you don't help them and coach them through that and warn them ahead of time. It can cause problems for them, and of course, coming back to us as in sales, to hurt us big time. And so it's really about helping them understand who's supposed to get involved and what each role is likely going to encounter, or what they will encounter with each role in that stakeholder group, and how to help them be successful at being your champion.